They came like shadows across the stars, silent, disciplined, and cruel. The Frecan hunter known as Vesk inhaled deeply as he stepped down the boarding ramp, the acrid air of the Arta 9 station clinging to his nostrils. His companions, two Uric twins, sleek and pale like eyeless sharks, and a lumbering Brondax named Hull, fanned out behind him, each armed with personalized weapons made from the bones and plasma cores of past kills. Arta 9 pulsed with the greasy rhythms of the frontier: trade, violence, and desperation. Ships groaned in neglected docking rings while scavenger children dodged past drunken smugglers and debt slavers. Amid it all, Vesk moved with purpose. Their prey had been spotted here. A human female. Average height. Dark hair, possibly military-trained. Highly dangerous, the broker had warned. Vesk didn't believe in hyperbole. No human had ever posed more than a mild inconvenience. He double-checked the bounty puck glowing on his wrist. 75,000 credits. Wanted for espionage, theft, and something vague labeled interference with classified galactic proceedings. Vague, but lucrative. That alone had piqued his interest. The puck blinked again. Target proximity, 300 meters. Station interior, lower merchant decks. Vesk tapped his comm, spread. Eyes open. Confirm identity before engagement. I want her breathing. The Yorick slithered through side corridors, whispering static into the comms. Hull stomped forward, attracting attention as intended. Distraction. Intimidation. It worked on lesser prey. As they dispersed, Vesk felt the familiar cold tension of the hunt fill his chest. Not adrenaline. He had trained that out of himself. This was calculation. Purpose. He descended through a spiraling staircase wrapped in flickering neon signs. The merchant decks reeked of roasted protein slabs and illegal exhaust scrubbers. Beneath his hood, his irises shifted spectrum, infrared to ultraviolet, scanning faces, looking for anomalies. He saw her in reflection before he saw her in flesh. In the convex curve of a food stall's heating plate, her figure ghosted past. Dark jacket, worn boots, short hair pulled back. Movement efficient, but not rushed. Her head turned slightly as if catching some imperceptible cue. A subtle twitch of the left wrist. Muscle memory. He ducked sideways into a clothing booth and keyed his comm, confirmed visual. Mark is walking north-northwest along main merchant spine. She is aware. Caution advised. She shouldn't have noticed, hissed one of the Yoriks. No eyes in her back. Instinct, Vesk said. Or training. The woman moved past a small group of dockhands playing dice. She paused, adjusted her jacket. The movement exposed the edge of a low-slung belt, no weapon visible. A civilian, at a glance. But Vesk saw more. Her posture was wrong for a civilian. He signaled the Yoriks to box her in at the corridor's terminus, near the ventilation gate. Hull would block the rear. Vesk took the high angle, climbing a scaffold where he could observe. She turned into the trap perfectly, with no hesitation. They closed in. Hull's massive frame thudded against the floor behind her, while the Yoriks slithered down the corridor walls like ghosts. The woman stopped walking. She didn't flinch. She looked up, just slightly, and then to the side, directly at the wall where one of the Yoriks was cloaked. Nice formation, she said, voice cool. Classic 3-angle box. Textbook. That gave them pause. Hands up, Hull rumbled. She obeyed, slowly lifting them. No fear. No confusion. Just a faint smirk. One of the Yoriks moved in, neural cuffs hissing with blue sparks. Resistance will be unpleasant. She raised an eyebrow. I'd recommend doubling that charge. Your first shot won't be enough. The Uric laughed and snapped the cuffs on. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her body jerked, not from resistance, but with a jolt of preemptive tension. The cuffs discharged. She staggered a step. Exhaled. Then straightened. You call that unpleasant? She asked dryly. Vesk descended, eyes narrowed. Name. Now. She turned to him, eyes locked. Maya. Maya what? Doesn't matter. You're not cleared for the rest. He took her by the arm. You'll tell us everything once we deliver you. She didn't resist the escort. If anything, she moved with them willingly, an amused glint in her eye. That was wrong. Vesk catalogued the anomaly but said nothing. Back at the ship, a matte black Predator-class courier retrofitted for live cargo, they tossed her into a sealed restraint pod. She said nothing as the pod sealed, only met Vesk's eyes with calm certainty. The door shut with a hiss. The air in the ship turned metallic. 2 hours into the journey to the prison moon of the Los 7, the crew relaxed. The Yoriks played digital Fong dice. Hull polished his seismic maul. Vesk sat alone in the command nest, reviewing footage of the capture. Frame by frame. Something gnawed at him. Her movements were too clean. Her compliance, too smooth. The smirk, the lack of panic. None of it fit the profile of a rogue civilian or even a trained mercenary. She hadn't asked why she was being captured. She hadn't negotiated, screamed, or pleaded. She had let them take her. Vesk tapped his comm again. Yurik, 1. Bioscan the human. Make sure she's not concealing a reactive implant. Already done. No tech. Just a higher-than-expected nerve regeneration factor and adrenaline control. Still well within human spectrum. Double check. A pause. Why? She's cuffed. No weapons. Sedated by now. Do it. Vesk ended the call. His instincts hadn't failed him in 20 years. They whispered now, loud and cold. He pulled up the bounty database again. Her file was suspiciously thin. No military tags. Just a string of planetary violations and the label, human female. Possibly Terran black market operative. Known to escape custody. Engage with caution. Too vague. Someone had scrubbed this file. A soft clang echoed from the aft section. Vesk's eyes narrowed. He stood, pulled his sidearm, and stalked toward the pod chamber. Inside, Maya sat still within her restraints. Her eyes were closed. Breathing deep. Come. Vesk watched through the viewport for a moment. Then he opened the speaker. Why so calm? Her eyes flicked open. Because I know where this ends. He frowned. And where's that? Not where you think. A chill ran through him. He shut the speaker, turned away, and missed the way she tilted her head, just enough to crack her neck against the collar brace. A microjolt ran down her spine. Something subtle clicked within her nervous system. Far across the ship, the lights flickered. 20 minutes later, the pod was empty. The crew reacted with disorganized panic. She shouldn't be out, one Yurik barked. She's vented, another yelled. No, she's in the vents. She triggered a lockdown. How? Hull stomped toward the rear cargo bay, roaring. I'll find her. Smash her into paste. She won't go near you head-on, Vesk muttered. He moved with control, rifle drawn, every hallway echoing with tension. Then came the first scream. One of the Yoriks, Yurik, 2, cut off mid-report. A gurgling noise replaced his voice on the channel. Silence followed. Yurik, 1, confirm. Vesk snapped. No answer. She's hunting us? Hull muttered, confusion creasing his tusked brow. Vesk didn't respond. He knew it was worse than that. She wasn't hunting them. She was dismantling them. It was a correction. An inversion of the hunt. They reached the comm room, empty. The control panels had been burned, precise plasma marks disabling navigation and distress. Then a soft voice crackled from the overhead speaker. You were warned, Maya said. You never should have cuffed me. But you didn't know. Not your fault, really. Vesk aimed at the ceiling. Stand down. This is your last chance. No, she said calmly. It's yours. A clang sounded from below. A floor panel snapped up. Hull dove, too slow. A concussive blast knocked him sideways. From the smoke, Maya emerged in a crouch, her silhouette sharp, eyes cold. Vesk opened fire. She moved like liquid steel, past the arc, inside the range. One strike disabled his shoulder. Another flipped him against the wall. She held his own stunner to his throat. "I gave you a chance." He glared, breathing hard. "Who are you?" She leaned in. "You'll find out soon. Read the ID when you wake up." Then everything went black. When Vesk came to, he was alone. The ship was rerouted, locked in orbit above the Los 7. The rest of the crew was restrained in their own cells. Systems were frozen, emergency overrides activated. On the command chair sat a slim data chip, flashing. He reached out, trembling slightly, and inserted it into the console. A single screen opened. Terran Special Operations. Strike Commander Maya Rendra. Active clearance. Level Delta Vermilion. Field status. Operative immune. Target capture protocols forbidden. Engagement warning. Classified threat level Omega. Reputation designation. Spectre. Vesk's hearts pounded. A line at the bottom pulsed slowly. "Next time, ask before you hunt ghosts." He swallowed. The hunt had ended. And the wrong woman had been hunted. The first time Maya held a gun, she was 15. Her instructor, a retired Martian recon colonel named Bragg, had looked her over with undisguised contempt before handing her the sidearm. Not because she was young. Plenty of soldiers in training were. It was because she was smiling. "You think this is a game?" he'd growled, sun-scarred and titanium-knuckled. She hadn't answered, just taken the weapon with steady hands and lowered her stance into textbook form. The recoil nearly dislocated her wrist. She hadn't flinched. Bragg had blinked once. Then only once more when she hit all 6 targets in 6 shots, each a tighter cluster than the last. Bragg muttered something about ghosts and let her move on to hand-to-hand training. Years later, she would remember that day as clearly as her first kill. She remembered both without remorse, just catalogued entries, filed under necessity. She hadn't smiled much since. Now, sitting in the shadowed crawlspace behind the courier ship's maintenance chamber, Maya recalled Bragg's warning in full. Never let them see the badge unless it's the last thing they'll ever read. That thing's not a shield, it's a death sentence, for them or for you. The badge had stayed tucked away, even now. Even after escaping the restraints, disabling the ship, and leaving its crew either unconscious or shackled. She hadn't needed the badge yet. But she would. Maya peered through the maintenance panel's mesh, watching the Brondax, the one called Hull, struggling against the reinforced binding cables she'd used to secure him to a bulkhead. His rage made him predictable. That had helped. Her body ached from the effort, the burns from the neural cuffs still fresh along her wrists. But her mind was calm, measured, calculating. A quiet buzz in the crawlspace caught her attention. A thin blue dot blinked on the wall across from her. Surveillance node. She reached up, flicked a shunt from her utility band, and scrambled its feed in under 5 seconds. They wouldn't see her unless she wanted them to. Somewhere on the ship, Vesk would be trying to understand what went wrong. He'd be combing the bounty system, pulling any data he could. It wouldn't help him. The files had been buried for a reason. Back on Earth, those who knew her name kept it in sealed servers beneath layers of dead switch protocols. The Ghost Branch, as the media once called it, had never officially existed. But among certain Terran forces, her unit had a legacy, a shadow whispered between planets. Strike 9. No insignia. No official rank structure. Just results. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the hum of the ship's systems recalibrating. Everything she needed to reroute was almost within reach: NAV controls, communications, even the ship's docking signature. The rest was timing. She leaned her head back against the cold bulkhead and let her mind drift to the last conversation she had with Colonel Bragg before he was transferred off-world. They were sitting under the simulated stars of the training dome, post-mission debrief still flickering in holographic fragments beside them. "You'll be hunted someday," Bragg had told her, grizzled voice low, "and it won't be because of mistakes. It'll be because you're too good. Too efficient. They'll decide you've seen too much, done too much, become too much. "I'll be ready," she'd replied. "No. You'll be angry," he corrected. But that's not the same thing. Now she understood what he meant. Anger had no place in precision. Her escape hadn't been born of fury, it had been necessity and math. Emotion was a liability she'd long since learned to box and bury. Still, something in her tightened when she remembered the ambush on Arta 9. Not because it was violent. Not because of the cuffs or the threat. It was the look in their eyes. The way they'd regarded her as prey. Fragile. Lesser. A challenge, at best. They didn't know what a real threat looked like. Not yet. Elsewhere on the ship, a new voice spoke. "Commander. I think I found something." The voice belonged to a thin, wide-eyed technician named Rel, fresh out of a secondary academy on Rhodia Prime. He was the crew's information specialist, which mostly meant he filed forms and ran ident scans. His skin was the color of old parchment, and his arms bore faint phosphor lines, bioimplants for data interfacing. Vesk turned his head toward him slowly. "What did you find?" Rel hesitated, eyes darting between the screen and his commanding officer. "Her name. Or part of it. It wasn't on the primary bounty net. I had to go into decommissioned Terran military networks. Layered encryption. I think this was supposed to stay hidden." "Show me." The display glowed with a soft red outline as a file opened, heavily redacted, but not entirely. A digital ID badge flickered into view, rough around the edges, but legible. Maya Rendra. Strike Commander. Terran Special Operations. Unit 9. Clearance. Vermilion Class. Engagement Classification. NON Viable. Do not attempt detention without Council-level approval. Rel's mouth went dry. "There's more." Vesk's jaw tightened. "Go on." "She's listed as Spectre. That's not a code name, it's a designation. Operational myth. Said to have led the breach at the Calith event Horizon." "That was a massacre," Vesk said quietly. "An entire installation gone. Not a trace." "Exactly. And she's supposed to be dead. 3 times over, according to the logs. Each time, black box records just stop." For a moment, silence hung between them. The corridor lights flickered again, no malfunction this time. Maya was sending a message. Why wasn't any of this on the bounty puck? Vesk asked. Rel looked sick. Because the client who issued the bounty paid for suppression protocols. They didn't want her status flagged. They wanted her taken quietly. Probably to disappear her. Vesk's voice dropped. "They used us." He rose, stepped away from the console, and stared at the sealed corridor leading to the engine room. A low thrum echoed from within, pulse synchronized to the ship's core. That wasn't standard. "She's not just escaping," he muttered. "She's gathering intel." "She's what?" "She's playing the long game." Rel shook his head, stepping back. "We have to alert someone. The prison moon, someone." Vesk didn't reply. His thoughts were moving too fast. He wasn't afraid. Not yet. But he was beginning to understand the scope of his mistake. They hadn't captured a rogue agent. They had woken a sleeping weapon. Back inside the engine crawlspace, Maya tapped out her final override sequence. The ship's navigation bent subtly, just enough to slip their trajectory 0.04 degrees. In space, that was more than enough. It would take them into orbit near the Los 7 relay station, not the moon's maximum security docking ring. Close enough to drop a message before anyone noticed. She inhaled slowly, regulating her pulse. Everything was in place. The encrypted transmission would piggyback off a civilian netstream at the next ping interval. Inside the compressed signal, data packets containing the bounty contract, the false flag files, and her complete sensor logs of the crew's actions. The real target of this entire exercise wasn't escape. It was exposure. Whoever wanted her off the grid was powerful enough to bury military records across 3 systems. But even shadow empires relied on secrecy. Drag their manipulations into the light, and they withered. She would be that light. Maya adjusted the settings and pre-armed the escape pod, not to eject, not yet, but to act as a decoy. If they tried to track her, they'd find only a warm shell full of scrambled echoes. Her real path would be harder to trace. It always was. Still, a small part of her hesitated before climbing back into the access tunnel. Not from fear, but from memory. Once, years ago, she'd stood in a similar maintenance duct during the Harrow protocols on Titan Outpost Theta. She'd had 10 minutes to make a call, save the crew or complete the mission. She'd chosen the mission. The crew never forgave her. She didn't need their forgiveness. But she still remembered their faces. She pressed forward. Across the ship, Rel slumped in his chair, whispering to himself. What do we do? What do we even do? Vesk stood silent, eyes locked on the darkened passageways that crisscrossed the vessel like veins. Somewhere in those veins, a ghost moved. Efficient. Precise. Inevitable. She hasn't killed us yet, he said finally. That's not mercy. It's choice. You think she's still here? Vesk turned away. I think she's everywhere. A second later, the lights in the corridor dimmed to a dull red. From the walls, a quiet pulse began, like a heartbeat. Maya's voice drifted through the ship's internal comms again. Come. Unhurried. You don't have to die. You just have to stop pretending you're the predators in this story. The line cut. Outside, the stars remained cold and distant. But inside the ship, something had changed. They were no longer traveling with a prisoner. They were traveling with a message. One the galaxy was about to hear. The silence before the first explosion was absolute. For exactly 9 seconds, the only sound aboard the ship was the muted thrum of the engines and the faint, erratic breathing of its crew. Then the blast came, surgical, compact, devastating. The primary power relay for the forward bulkhead imploded in a storm of plasma and fragmented alloy, throwing 3 compartments into darkness. It wasn't random. It was war. Maya dropped from the ceiling access port like a shadow made flesh, landing in a crouch beside the stunned form of Rel. Before he could shout, she pressed a pressure point near the base of his neck. He crumpled soundlessly. She didn't kill him. She hadn't killed any of them yet. Not out of compassion, but because silence was still the most potent weapon she wielded. Silence and fear. Her boots made no noise as she moved down the hallway. Every step was measured, controlled. She had become the ghost they claimed she was, and now they were going to learn what that meant. Vesk was in the bridge. She would deal with him last. The others would come first, the ones armed and still foolish enough to think this was a simple recapture mission. They were trained, some even talented, but not for this. Not for her. In the galley-turned field operations center, Hull and 2 others were regrouping. They'd armed themselves with high-yield ion casters and barricaded the entry points with emergency shielding. A tactical move, if they'd been facing anything but Maya. She crawled along the vent above them, silent as a drifting leaf, and watched through the grate as Hull barked orders. She's targeting systems now. Not just trying to escape. This is surgical. That means she's got a plan. Then we trap her, said the one with the scarred jaw. Cut her off at Section 6. Force her into the compression hold. No exits there. Then gas it. Maya smirked. Section 6 was exactly where she wanted them. With one smooth motion, she activated a preset charge on her wrist console. The vents above the galley released a fast-acting dispersal mist, colorless, odorless, and completely harmless. At first. Then the lights began to flicker. Muscles tensed involuntarily. Weapons drooped. Their eyes widened as neuroinhibitors disrupted their ability to control fine movement. She dropped into the room. Hull turned, mouth open to shout, but she was already there. A palm to his chest sent him sprawling. The others reached for their sidearms, but their fingers wouldn't obey. She didn't need to kill them. Not yet. A single nerve strike and a joint lock later, they were incapacitated. Alive. Breathing. Unconscious. She left them that way. No time to savor victory, only to press forward. With the crew systematically neutralized, only Vesk remained. And he knew it. He had sealed the bridge behind a triple-coated lockdown and was pacing in tight, coiled arcs, hand clenched around a compact energy pistol. His other hand hovered over the comm relay, ready to send a burst transmission to the nearest patrol beacon. He didn't send it. He knew better. If she wanted to kill him, he'd already be dead. But that didn't mean he had to surrender. The silence that fell in the aftermath of the ambush stretched, growing thicker with each passing second. Then the console before him flickered, briefly, but enough to show a line of text. Not a voice. Not an image. Just a message. You brought war. Let me show you how it ends. Vesk swallowed. His hand trembled just slightly on the pistol. I know what you are, he said aloud, knowing she could hear him. I know about the Calith breach. About Arta 9. About Kessel Gate. No reply. You're not a hero, he said, voice rising. You're a mistake. They built something they couldn't control, and now you think you can judge the rest of us. Still nothing. He fired 2 shots at the shadows near the back of the room, but the energy bursts dissipated against the reinforced wall. She wasn't there. But she was close. Then he felt it, a breath. A whisper against the back of his neck. He spun, fired, missed. The pistol skittered from his grasp. And she was behind him. Her hand caught his arm before he could strike. In a fluid motion, she twisted him off balance and pinned him to the console. Not enough to break. Just enough to dominate. You never asked why the bounty didn't list a threat level, she said quietly. Vesk struggled. Because they didn't want to scare us. No, she said. Because they didn't want survivors. His face twisted. Then why am I still alive? She leaned closer. Because I want you to deliver a message. She released him. He staggered back, glaring. You think this makes you a savior? He spat. You think they'll listen to a warning from a ghost? No, she said, turning away. But they'll listen to the silence I leave behind. The console crackled. Behind her, displays lit with a full data dump. Names, coordinates, corporate directives, falsified warrants. Everything the client had done to orchestrate her abduction. Everything that proved their corruption. She uploaded it all to the ship's black box relay, encoded with civilian protocols and redirected to 3 independent media nodes on the Los 7. By the time anyone could suppress it, it would already be public. She walked to the bridge door and paused. Don't follow me, she said. And she was gone. By the time Vesk reactivated the internal surveillance, she had already launched from the secondary escape bay. Not the decoy. The real one. The ship's sensors scrambled, trying to reacquire her signal. They failed. In the quiet that followed, Vesk looked over the damage. Not just the shattered systems or the unconscious crew, but the deeper wound, the knowledge of what they'd tried to do, and who they'd failed to stop. In a distant void, Maya drifted in her pod, orbiting just beyond the Los perimeter. Her transmission had gone through. She'd burned the mask of secrecy her enemies hid behind. Now, they would come. But this time, not to hunt. This time, to explain. She leaned back, letting the stars fill the viewport. She wasn't running anymore. Hell had already been unleashed. Now it was waiting. The fallout began before the escape pod's beacon faded from sensor grids. Within hours, the data packets Maya had broadcast fractured the controlled silence that had shielded her existence. Across the Los 7 and into the broader systems, encrypted channels flared to life with scrambled transmissions, redacted files, classified logs, and hidden contracts spilling like a breach in a dam. For Vesk and the surviving crew, the consequences were immediate and brutal. Military inquiry boards convened in near secrecy, condemning them for gross negligence. The bounty hunters found themselves pawns, scapegoats sacrificed to placate the rising tide of public outrage. Their reputations, once forged in the sharp fire of pursuit and capture, were eroded beneath waves of political blame and media frenzy. Yet none of that mattered to Maya. Her mission had never been about personal vindication. It was about exposing the rot at the core of power, the covert machinations that birthed the manhunt that had twisted her from soldier into fugitive. Orbiting the remote station where she transmitted her proof, Maya's pod drifted like a shard of broken glass. The black box evidence had ignited upheaval. Official investigations unmasked corporate corruption, unscrupulous government agents, and clandestine war profiteers. What had once been hidden beneath layers of forged identities and suppressed memories surged to the surface, undeniable and unstoppable. But the spotlight came with a cost. Her face, once anonymous behind the haze of classified files, became a symbol. To some, a liberator, to others, a target. Mercenaries and assassins, cloaked in the same shadowy contracts that had once hunted her, began to close in. Yet even amidst the danger, Maya found unexpected allies. In the underground networks of the Low Seven, dissidents who'd long resisted authoritarian control reached out through encrypted channels. Ex-military operatives, hackers, and idealists rallied to her cause, forming a fragile coalition born from shared defiance. She had sparked a movement. But movement required sacrifice. A message arrived from an old contact, cryptic but urgent. They've located the vault. Prepare for breach. You're the key. The vault was the repository of Strike 9's classified operations, the heart of what made her what she was. If it fell into the wrong hands, everything would unravel. Maya's mind raced. The legacy she carried was no longer just hers. It was a beacon and a burden. With a calculated calm, she set a course for the vault's coordinates deep beneath the Los VI's surface. Her escape pod, now patched and armed, became a vessel of purpose rather than flight. Inside the labyrinthine caverns that housed the vault, security protocols pulsed like a living organism. Layers of biometric locks, AI sentinels, and automated defenses. Yet Maya moved with practiced precision, disabling systems and bypassing firewalls with the same resolve that had seen her through countless missions. At the vault's core, she faced the final safeguard, a neural lock keyed to her own biosignature. As she interfaced, memories flooded back, missions executed in silence, comrades lost, lines crossed in the name of a greater good. This was more than data. It was her story, etched in code and blood. But then the alarm flared. Outside, footsteps echoed, too many to fight alone. The coalition had arrived. Together, they secured the vault, extracting critical files and evidence that promised to dismantle the Shadow Cabal once and for all. As dawn broke over the Low Seven, Maya stood amidst the quiet aftermath, knowing the battle was far from over. Her actions had irrevocably altered the course of countless lives, hers, her enemies, and those who would rise in her wake. In the depths of space, the legend of the Spectre grew, not merely as a ghost haunting the hunters, but as a catalyst for change in a galaxy hungry for truth. And somewhere beyond the reach of prying eyes and dark contracts, Maya Rendra prepared for the next chapter, ready to fight not just for survival, but for the legacy she had reclaimed.